incident. So tensions also aroused by the cultural misunderstanding and prejudice. That I gave you the example already. Right? Taiwan was then, by any standards, one of the most modernized areas in East Asia. Soldiers from mainland China were actually not used to such modernity, and sometimes absolutely or naively. They were often laughed at or made fun of. However, the nepotism allowed those who might not be as qualified as their Taiwanese counterparts to take good jobs. And they also lead to resentment amongst this local elite, especially when the local elite thought they were much or far better qualified than those of the Chinese. They enjoyed much better education. Most of them were actually educated in Japan. And this kind of attitude was actually the major problem. Okay, as I mentioned, that the situation in 1947 was not really the most bad time. There was actually a newspaper of 1946. It says that the agricultural plan increased the productivity in agricultural products as well as fruits. They even have a proper figure that actually the situation was actually getting better. Right? So that was actually the situation in Taichung area. The plantation increased. The production of rice, sugar, sweet potatoes, papayas, all increased in this area. Well, the increase certainly is in comparison with the situation of 1945. Right? So as I mentioned, the situation was not really the worst. And the economical situation in 1946, the irrigation system in Jianan plant, in Jiayi and Tainan, the Japanese started to build or to set up the irrigation system there, was actually destroyed during the war. And the Taiwanese government now reinstalled the irrigation system, and irrigation was actually possible and covered a huge land, and including Zhanghua area, including Jiayi and Tainan area, and therefore the agricultural production increased again in 1946. So the already hit bottom, they started to getting better in 1946, 1947. But the causes of the event, the social unrest, we just asked about the crime rate increased, was actually the theft became prevalent, and the troops they stationed in Taiwan was actually, some of them were actually undisciplined. Therefore, there are cases of looting, stealing, and often bullying people. There was actually the major crimes in Taiwan. And these caused deep and bitter resentment among those elderly people. And another reason was that Chinese did not trust the local people, just simply because of the people didn't speak the language, and they thought they were actually Japanese. Right? These three factors, the corruption, the social unrest, and so on, the mistrust, over the long term enforced the resentment of the local people, and therefore there was some major clash. And in 1946 there was another case here that storage, right? A lot of materials, living materials. For example, the case here was actually sugar. The vendors, they just, or the wholesales, they just kind of put things in the warehouse and refused to sell. Just wanted to wait for a better price. And when the government found out, things will be confiscated and so on. Therefore, these kind of economical conflicts also became more and more often. Right? There's the hoarded sugar found in Pingdong and so on. So the event started in February 27th, and then the police, there was actually the Idingmu is actually one of the police station, police box, in Japanese it's called koban, right? The little police box were actually burnt down, and some of the vehicles around will also be burnt down. There was this situation in the morning of 28th of February, right? So the uprising started, violence broke out, and crowd gathered in front of the provincial executive office, nowadays the presidential office building, to protest. There was actually not far away from the Hengyang River, Hengyang Street. So citizens protested at the governor's office, and the police started to open fire on the unarmed demonstrators. Then several dozens of the people were actually killed or injured. This provoked the public anger, and the entire city was actually restless. Shops closed immediately, plants shut down, and the students walked out of the classroom and joined the protest. And the situation started getting worse, out of control, and spread across the island. They were actually mobilized, and the governor declared a state of emergency, and they decided to send troops in to crack down the unrest. But, as I mentioned, the mobs were actually trained in military skills, and therefore they knew what to do. They attacked the military base immediately and looted the munition, and got enough of the arms and fires and so on. And therefore they started to attack those who are not Taiwanese, the so-called 外省人, the outsiders or non-Taiwanese. Just they identify this by using language as the indicator. If you don't speak Taiwanese, if you don't speak Japanese, you must be from mainland China, right? And you'll be attacked. Therefore, tourists, journalists, and civil servants were actually injured, and the personal belongings were robbed, looted. And then the mob started to loot, to attack shops. And shops or institutions were actually raided by the mobs. The government sent troops to the street to crack down the mob, and therefore the social unrest escalated. And between March the 1st and March the 5th, the situation was really very, very serious. Young people broadcasted to all of the Taiwanese to stand up and urge people to rise up and fight against the Chinese. Riots occurred in all the major cities and towns of Taiwan. So the angry mobs attacked police stations, government offices, and the mainland Chinese who were actually in Taiwan were also the target. Some of them hired up, and some of them were really injured seriously, and some of them killed. But the one thing is, if they were killed, they can never be traced back, because Chinese governments, a lot of them, in many cases, kind of just drew the people into the army, sent to Taiwan, not letting the family members know whereabouts of those little soldiers. And the little soldiers were killed in Taiwan. They were killed and died as nobody. therefore the figure was really unknown. Okay, the March the 5th and March the 8th, then the Chinese communists also took part in the uprising. There was a Taiwanese, CHOU, a very famous Taiwanese communist. She organized a brigade called the 27th Brigade, 27部队, and fought actively in Taichung area. They attacked the local military base, looted a large quantity of weapons to equip further members. And they handed in a list of so-called 32 demands, wanted to take over the provincial administration, demanded greater autonomy, free elections, and so on, and asked Chiang Kai-shek to end the corruptions of the government employees. So at the beginning, Chen Yi agreed, the governor of Taiwan, Chen Yi, agreed the committee's demands of reforming, the so-called reforming of the administration of Taiwan province. But at the same time, he sent for troops. So for a short time, the protesters got control over much of Taiwan. For example, all these spots or the stations, police stations and so on in Kaohsiung, in Taichung and so on. So therefore, Chen Yi had to send for help from Nanking. So the March of the 8th of March 1947, then the Chiang Kai-shek sent his military, the 21st Division, led by Liu Yuqing, to Taiwan, which landed in Keelung on the 8th of March. Then the military operation started. Many protesters were actually injured or killed. Right? The government troops just shouted or shooted, opened fire to the people. And during which time some of the Aborigines also took part in this incident. Right? The Zhou tribe, for example, attacked the airport facilities in Jiayi. Weapons were actually gathered and plans were actually made. The aim was actually to block the road for the troops from mainland China. And but when they realized that Chinese started sending troops into Taiwan, then some of the participants decided to retreat. Some of them decided to negotiate with the government. And when the so-called negotiations started, the Chinese troops have already gained control over Taiwan, and therefore all these negotiators were all shot by the government. And the 21st Division soon restored order in Taipei. Then they started to move southbound. And they started a so-called the clear-up operation, Qingxiang operation, to clear up all the countryside. And after some fierce battles, the protesters were actually forced to give up. The military operation ended very, very soon, but then the political operation started, and then they started to arrest these the elites as well as the social leaders. Most of them were actually attorneys, journalists, school teachers, and so on. And a lot of doctors were also involved and got killed or imprisoned for a long time. Some died in the jail. So leaders of the uprisings were actually under arrest, and some of them executed, right? Others detained in prison without any trial. And we can see that one or two of these kind of scenes in Taiwan that the leaders were actually shot on the streets, and all the newspapers, magazines were shut down. The troops reportedly executed between 3,000 and 4,000 people throughout the island. I think the figure is really reliable. Right? So the Xinjiang movement started on March 20th. The authority began the so-called Xinjiang clear-up the campaign. People were asked to hand over weapons and turn in a list of crooks or face prosecution themselves. Many people were actually arrested and executed, most without public trials. Okay, then, after the operation by the Chinese Nationalist Army, the 22-day incident, then the Minister of Defense of Chinese government, Bai Chongxi, visited Taiwan. He was actually, his son is also very famous, an author called Bai Xianyong, Bai Chongxi, who was actually a Muslim and a very important figure in the military. He visited Taiwan, and as I mentioned, he named a figure of the injuries. So the damage to Taiwan, the Bai incident not only meant the death and the destruction of many Taiwanese families, it also had a huge impact on the future political and social developments in Taiwan. There was also a psychological shock to the Taiwanese. Right? The culture of Taiwanese people was severely distorted, and they began to show slave-like personalities as a result of their fear. A lot of people hide their intentions. One of the representative will be Li Denghui, who was actually working with the KMT and very obediently. So the Jiang Jingbo selected him as the successor of the KMT government, believed that he can serve Taiwan to the Taiwanese end. As soon as he got to the power, then he decided to promote the independence of Taiwan and try to get rid of the KMT, for example. There was actually a lot of elites, a lot of people actually under the Kuomintang rule. They all try to hide, all pretend to be working with KMT. Right? Interesting that if you want to study this kind of phenomenon there. And a lot of people were still haunted by the Bai incident. For example, this one, who was actually a Aborigine from the CHOU tribe. He was actually looking for her husband, who killed in the Bai incident. As I mentioned, a lot of the Aborigines also involved in the Bai incident. So she was actually still looking for his loved ones after Bai incident, and after long after the Bai incident. Think about the picture of her husband. He must have died very young, and at her old age, she was still looking for the husband. Suddenly, she never knew the whereabouts of the husband. Right? What happened to him was very unknown, a mystery, just disappeared. So, for a long time, the Taiwanese felt fear and indifference towards politics. Right? This greatly changed the local politics. Therefore, all these the election before, say, 1980s, they were actually was all won by the KMT, and they just give you 1 or 2 soaps or a towel, so that you can go and vote for the KMT. So for a long time, so over 30 years time, the KMT always won the elections, local election or the central government elections. And one of the reasons was actually the disappearance of the elites. The cream of the society disappeared from the political field. Some of them actually went hiding, some of them went abroad. A lot of the Taiwanese elites went to Japan to live there, and they can practice, say, as doctors, as whatsoever in Japan. They refused to come back to Taiwan. And therefore the Taiwanese society was left with no leaders. And I think the gentry class, the social leader was actually missing. It was actually one of the major factors that in the 3 decades after the Bai incident was the political tribute that was so quiet and nothing happened was because of this fact. Only after 30 years of time, then the local gentries or the local social elites started to work, and then the so-called 党外 outside of the KMT party started to work, to move, and to organize movement. So, surviving members of the social elites who actually are willing to get involved in politics again. So therefore, the political story in Taiwan was really quiet, right? And the constitution of local politics changed because corruptly local gentry and criminal elements began to dominate the local political world. A lot of gangsters, they started to get involved with politics. Therefore, there is a term called 黑金, either black, meaning the gangsters, or jin, meaning who the rich people can buy off the ballots, buy off the election. They were actually the dominant factor of the local elections, and therefore the seeds of black gold, 黑金, actually were actually solved because of the. Then the KMT also wanted to work with these so-called the fractions, the black, the gangsters, and the rich people, and therefore there was actually the characters of the Taiwanese democracy after the Second World War, which lasted 30 years. So the one-party rule or the one-party dictatorship led Taiwan to another era called the White Terror. And we have to know one thing, that the White Terror knows no boundary. The White Terror knows no the rhythm of the people. You suffer not because you are Taiwanese. You suffer because you don't agree with the government. And therefore, a lot of people from mainland China who was also suffering from the White Terror. So White Terror knows no boundary. Therefore, the democratic situation in Taiwan was actually very interesting, right? And the conflict also deepened the ethnic gap. For a long time, the Taiwanese refused to marry their daughters to the people from mainland China, and this kind of social or ethnic gap were very noticeable. I think nowadays it's impossible to notice these kind of things, that the so-called Taiwanese won't get married to the people from mainland China. This situation has already been eased down. So the people's daily lives were also affected by the KMT rule. The whole society was actually perceivably under the shadow of the so-called Greater China. This is another story. Local history has been ignored and marginalized. So there was a long time the Taiwanese were not supposed to study Taiwanese history, right? They were not supposed to work anything to do with China, with local thing. And for a long time, the Taiwanese theater, Taiwanese copy show, and so on was actually ignored. The government kind of sponsored the theater, the plays, like a Peking opera, and ignored the Gezaishi. But in the 1960s, 1960s, 70s, when the television became fashion. When most of the household had television, then the social control tightened up, and well, there should be no Taiwanese shows or programs in local language in Taiwanese, and the puppy shows, Budaishi, will be restricted also. That was all because of this the urban incident, right? And this is actually the place called Tianma Cafang. The film we just showed was part of this was actually the Tianma Cafang, which was one of the most advanced or most modernized tea house, where in the Tianma Cafang itself there was actually Western music played, coffee served, and so on. And that was actually the place where the people actually gathered. That was actually the first place when the WHEI-MING incident started. Just because this was actually the city center then. Nowadays it is really remote, not far away from the Danshui River. And the place was actually torn down, will be rebuilt. And still the banner says that salute the people of the WHEI-MING incident who sacrificed in the WHEI-MING incident. That was actually the site, the Tianma Tea House. They're located in the Taiping Macho. The Taiping Macho was actually the city center then during the Japanese colonial time. A person called Zhang Tianma, who owned this place, one of the early public houses in Taipei, served as a meeting point for the literati. And the film that I just showed you was actually all about the Tianma Cafang. Okay, there was actually one of the advertisements of the Tianma Cafang. Well, started in the end of Japanese colonial time, dealing with sugar, dealing with American milk powder, canned food. That was all the symbol of the modernization at that stage, right? So that was the place. So the WHEI-MING incident was a political taboo for over 40 years. Only when martial law was actually lifted in 1987, people started to discuss this matter openly. Despite the fact that the material concerning this matter are now available, many people still choose not to believe it. And the government set up a 228 Memorial Foundation in 1995. The organization investigates and researches the matter with the eventual goal of compensation and consolation of the victims. And this goal was never achieved because, as I mentioned, people choose to believe or choose not to believe because of the background, not because of the reality or the research. So by learning a lesson from the history, we learn not to repeat the same mistake. We don't know, right? And we just want to know that Chen Yi, the governor of Taiwan, right, was executed much later in 1950. Right? It's a newspaper of Central Daily News. He was executed not because of the incident of the WHEI-MING. He was executed because he was asked to fight against the Communist Party, and he failed. And he started to negotiate with the communists, and therefore he was actually arrested by Chiang Kai-shek and is executed. He's now buried in Taipei. Well, his remains was actually brought back to Taiwan and buried in Xi's area. The grave is still there, but no one will actually remember. And funny enough, ironically enough, he was not executed. he was executed, not because of the incident, right? So that's about the Any questions? Yes.
I'm just thinking like these Taiwanese people are also Han people.
Yes.
And should they not have been? They should have associated well with KMT.
Pardon?
When they came, should they have not associated well with KMT?
Well, some of them, yes. Not everyone. Some of the Taiwanese went to mainland China for study. Some of them went to mainland China to fight against Japanese. Some of them were actually joined the military as well as the government service in China. And they came to Taiwan with the KMT government. One of the best examples would be Lian Zhan, the ex-vice president. Lian Zhan's father, Lian Zhendong, his grandfather was actually the author of the General History of Taiwan, Lian He. The father went to mainland China to fight against Japanese and worked for the government. After the victory, after the war, the end of the war, Lian Zhendong was sent to Taiwan and became the director of food supply. And Lian Zhan was actually educated, receiving a very good education, got his PhD in Chicago. He served as one of the best examples of the Taiwanese working with the KMT. Another one can be named would be Xie Dongmin, who also studied in mainland China, went to university in mainland China, worked with the KMT government, and came to Taiwan. And then as agent, because he spoke Taiwan Chinese. Both of the Lian Zhan, for example, Lian Zhan's mother was actually a mainland Chinese. The father married the mother in mainland China, met his mother and married them there. So Lian Zhan himself, he was born in mainland China, studied and went to his elementary school in Xi'an province. The first, the mother tongue was actually Chinese. Only when after coming to Taiwan, he started to learn Taiwanese, right? And these people will be also called half mountain. The mountain meaning the Chinese from mainland China called Ashan, right? And those who actually work with the Chinese, work with KMT will be named Banshan, half mountain. That they will be considered for the Taiwanese, for some of the Taiwanese, as collaborators. They were actually agents of the KMT. And they were actually the people like this. But we shouldn't forget a large proportion of Taiwanese actually work with the KMT, accept the KMT as the political identification, and they actually received all the benefits and educated under KMT. They work with KMT. That's why you see that KMT is still a popular political party with the support of the Taiwanese also, not only from the mainland Chinese. And a lot of the mainland Chinese, as I mentioned, suffered from the White Terror, and they were actually work against the KMT. There's no doubt. So therefore, the birthplace is not the only the indicator of the political identification. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
When did the high school students start to learn history? I mean, the real history, according to grade.
Well, there is no such thing called real history. The history depends on the explanation, the point of view. And you want to see what is the one thing there. Well, I say the truth, the reality can never be rebuilt, can never be reconstructed. Yes.
I think like you said, after martial law was lifted, it started being talked about. But when was it actually taught in school? Like it's taught in school to this day, right? Or Biden's day, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like Tiananmen Square for mainland, where they're still not teaching it.
Yes.
But like,
So,
when did that become popular?
after 1987.
Appropriate?
Yeah, after 1987, these topics are already brought in, the history as well as the civil training.
And
Right.
so like all the textbooks
And bit by bit.
were gradually added to
Yes, yes,
after 87.
yes. Right. And nowadays, because of the situation, the political atmosphere changed so much. Therefore, most of the books, school textbooks, will discuss about this measure. And this, as I mentioned, if you check all these textbooks, there's no unique story. Every author has his own version of the incident, or even how many were actually killed. It's not a standard figure there. Just, as I mentioned, just people choose to believe what they believe. Any other questions?
After Taiwan was handed back to China, yeah, Taiwanese rule, did the KMT have control of the male conscription? Were they able to go to the army in China?
In China or in Taiwan?
Yeah, before the Japanese returned back, before they returned back to Japan, the males were conscripted into the Japanese army, right? Taiwanese males?
Yes.
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 After 1945, were they...
Were the Taiwanese
drafted-
conscripted in the Chinese army?
Yes.
No,
No.
no. But there are some volunteers.
Volunteers.
Yeah, there are some volunteers. For example, one of the famous one would be the General Li, Taiwanese, who went to Guangdong to receive the military training and became a general. And there's another guy called Guo Zhongqing, for example. He was an admiral who, during the Japanese colonial rule, he just went to China and got military training there. They will be treated as Chinese, no problem.
So
Yeah.
men of draft age were required to join the army.
No,
No.
not long after that, the military conscription was actually introduced into Taiwan. But a lot of, so some of the Taiwanese will actually join the Chinese army, and some of them became the general or the military leader. Right.
I have one more question. When did the military draft become required of all Taiwanese males?
That must be after 1950s because of the invasion of communists over Yijiangshan, over this offshore island in Zhejiang and in Quemoy. Then there will be a major conflict between Communist Party and Taiwan. Then the KMT will need its soldiers to fight against the communists. Then there will be the conscription, and only soldiers were only asked to receive military training. There was actually no battle. Most of the offshore islands, Quemoy and so on, were actually guarded by the soldiers from mainland China. They were actually much more experienced in this matter. Like my father came to Taiwan at the age of 17. When he was 24, he was actually conscripted into the military training, received 3 months of training.
Oh,
Yeah.
what? Like the modern day draft, the one that's becoming more and more lenient. When did that start? I'm just curious.
This started much later.
As like from a different.
Yeah.
No.
That was when Chiang Kai-shek announced that he wants to fight back to mainland China. There's a operation called Woguang Operation, secret plant after the outbreak of the Vietnam War. Then Chiang Kai-shek thought there was a chance that America will actually help him to send troops back to mainland China. And he will actually via or the tour of Vietnam to go back to mainland China. So he started to train the soldiers to gain a huge military presence. Only then it was actually introduced. And the service time will be different, varies. At the very beginning, only 1 year service time. And later on, 2 years will be introduced. For some people, actually 3 years, because they got a better training. This kind of, like the SEAL group in America, this kind of the Mariners, they will have to serve for 3 years. And for a long time, well, it depends on the birth rate as well. Like I was born 1956, 50. During this period of time, there was actually the baby booms. So, well, I didn't have to go to the military because the supply was much more bigger than the demand. So 1/3 of the boys of this year, say 54, 56, 57, they didn't have to go to the military. So it all depends. And nowadays, the young ones, they didn't have to go any longer. Right? Became now the volunteers because we don't need so many militaries. And also as a joke, we always discuss about this question. We have tanks. When Taiwanese will require tanks to join the field, to its operation, Taiwan is already under the for attack. Well, actually, and again I said, there will be we don't need any kind of national defense. Once the communists wanted to liberate Taiwan, they only have to send airplanes to fly over the Taiwan Strait. The Taiwanese moral will be actually destructed, will collapse. Most of them will actually either surrender or go away, get away, like the situation of 1997 in Hong Kong. People will just try to go away, and the economy will collapse first. So I don't think there will be any case like that. Why should they be attacking or liberating Taiwan? And all this, we have to remember one thing, that the government expenditure on national defense is huge. Because once you can see that the one airplane dropped, which happens so frequently, there will be enough money for to run all the universities. It's incredible. Yeah. You know, the budget of the Taiwan universities is much lower than any of the military camps and so on. Right? And the government expenditure for a long time, 40% of the government expenditure was actually on the military purpose. 40%. Right? The figure is much too high. For the military, sorry, for the educational purposes or cultural purposes, say only 8%. Any other questions? Yeah.
I was reading that the 27th Brigade maybe had some links with the communists, and I'm wondering if that was domestic communist or was that related to communism in the mainland?
Well, Xie Xuehong herself was actually stayed in Shanghai for a long time. She had direct contact with the CCP Central, and she was actually organized or ordered by the CCP to come back to Taiwan for the military operation. So there was the tie between the Communist Party of mainland China and the Taiwanese Communist Party was actually obvious and direct and provable. Yeah.
Would there be some military support there as well? Because wasn't it the 27th Brigade that was able to take over the old Japanese weapons?
I say the organized people who actually got military training from Japan, right? Those communists or Taiwanese. There's quite amount of the large amount of the Taiwanese communists who had connection with the Japanese communists. So the so-called World Revolution or the United Front, those are obvious, and the Taiwanese communists had a strong connection with the Japanese communists. That was also obvious, provable.